take into consideration when making these decisions. And moreover, we want to know how we can align our current work ethic to meet our ultimate goals. And so
with all of these things going on. As you mentioned, I did my undergrad at UCT. I did my internship in George Hospital, which I was quite fortunate to get that post. It's a relatively small regional hospital, which had enough supervision, but also enough space to get some practical training and apply some of the very academic training that we get at UCT. So that was good. And I got exposure to surgery during that time as well, which I'll tell you about in a little while. After that, I did community service in Umtata and at Livingston. It was a combined 6 months. And there I did pediatrics, I did medicine, I did a lot of casualty time, and actually no surgery in that year. And then after com service at that time, many South African doctors, you were able to register overseas, and I had a huge student loan debt. And as many of my colleagues were doing and friends at the time, I went to the UK for a year. And I spent a year just locuming in different hospitals within the NHS. And then came home after a trip to Cuba, which was a kind of part of the political side of the trip to see what was happening in Cuba at the time. So at the end of all of that, I needed to make a decision about specializing, because I think, like all of you, we don't know much about the non-specializing route. And my mother's a doctor, and she had always said that she wished that she had specialized early before she had kids. And she didn't. She specialized afterwards, and she did family medicine and occupational health. And I suppose somewhere in my mind, I still had that sense that I should specialize and that I should do it early. I had a very strong interest in public health at the time, because I sort of came to health second and politics first. But I wanted to do a clinical specialty first before going into public health. And I must say that tension has kind of followed my whole career. Am I a clinician or am I a public health specialist? So my two great loves at the time, well, I actually loved medicine, pediatrics, and surgery. almost in equal measure. I loved medicine because I found it so interesting, you know, very academic. All the clever people did medicine. And I found surgery interesting because I'd done a cesarean section. That was the first operation that I did. Salome, you'll be pleased to hear. And I remember just the absolute thrill of doing the operation and putting everything back together again, and the baby coming out, and it was incredible. But it was the kind of what you could do with your hands that I loved. And then I just loved peds because I enjoyed working with children, so that was a third option for me. So I was sitting with those three possibilities, and I'm saying this because I think it's important to know that you often don't know what you're going to do until the time comes. So at the time, it was before antiretrovirals. I was doing my comm service in 2000. Everybody knows my age now, so I can say all these dates. I did my comm service in 2000. And at the time, you know, it was the height of the HIV epidemic in the country, and we didn't have treatment. And medicine in the Eastern Cape with that pandemic was just people dying actually of HIV. And it really, I struggled in my medicine rotation with all the death that we were seeing. So I kind of became an AIDS activist with TAC. And I decided to do surgery because the patients were surviving, and I could see the impact of what we were doing. So it's with those kinds of experiences that really shift us one way or the other in what we decide to do. Around that time, Professor Khan, who was head of UCT, came to PE and did a talk on surgery, which is a kind of recruitment talk that he often did. And he encouraged people to come into his department. So I applied for surgery. I also applied actually for pediatrics, and the surgical post came up first, and that's how it started. So that's kind of what my journey was like. I didn't mention that when I came back from the UK, I spent a year at Livingston as a medical officer in surgery to check if I really liked it and to gain some practical experience. So moving on to a little bit about the practical aspects of sort of getting into a surgical rotation. I think I've seen quite a few questions about medical officer time. I do think that it's really valuable to do medical officer time, particularly in smaller regional hospitals, where you're more likely to do operations and actually get some experience. Also gives you a sense if you really like this thing, if you enjoy surgery, if you know, it's a kind of late night emergency binary decisions, operate or not operate, and some people really enjoy that and some people don't, and you don't really know until you do it. The actual operating is only one part of it. So I think a year or two as a medical officer is very useful. Someone asked, should you do more years as a medical officer? Does it disadvantage you? And there's some discussion about that. So when you come to your registrar position interview, that is often a question that's asked. Why have you waited? I mean, these are some of the prejudices in the system, but it does come up. Why have you waited a while to do your specialization? So probably 1 to 2 years if you can, but you know, everyone's journey is different. And then there've been questions around if you want to get a surgical post, should you do some research? It is part of our interview set of questions, and I'm sure many other departments as well. You don't have to be a first author on a paper or do your whole research project, but you should, if you can, try and get involved in a research project during your medical officer time. And then with regards to exams, we have 3 exams in surgery: primaries, intermediates, and finals. And it's useful to have your primaries before you apply for your registrar post, just because registrarship is such a busy time. So I'll get a little bit onto, you can ask me some more questions about practical aspects a little bit later, perhaps. So should you specialize or not? So, you know, I think it's difficult. It would be really good to hear from more doctors who haven't specialized, to hear about their journey, because I think it's a story that we need to hear more about. But from a surgical side, we should know that most surgery in this country is performed by non-specialists. It's performed by medical officers, and very competently, a lot of it. Experienced medical officers who've trained in their regional hospitals or in rural hospitals and are delivering an excellent service and excellent clinical platforms where they work. So you don't have to specialize in order to work as a surgeon or as a physician or in a particular area. There are many medical officers who have areas of interest, and they are recognized as experts in that area. Surgery also has a diploma in surgery, which is a 2-year program.
Called me. He said I'm his watch space. They're having a...
Hello? I'm not sure what that was. So that's a little bit about the practical side. And in terms of a broader conversation needed about specialization versus being generalist in South Africa, I think that's very important. It also speaks to the conversation about subspecialization within different disciplines. And I think a more intentional approach to how many generalists versus specialists versus subspecialists we need in the country to deliver the kind of healthcare that we need to deliver is something that we should be having. So lastly, just a few comments on personal reflections. There was one question asking about what were the biggest lessons in coming to this point in your career. I think the biggest lesson is there's not really a blueprint. It's very difficult to look at someone else and say, wow, you know, they got there, they must have had a very clear plan and a vision and they just kind of stuck to the plan. And I don't think it's the case for most people. I think for most people, it's a mixture of passion and serendipity and where you happen to be. And you often find that you do things that you love and also with people that you get on very well with. And that might end up being a specialty that you'd never imagined that you would do. So for me, surgery was not something that I thought I would be doing when I was a 2nd or 3rd year student. There's also a lot of questions about how do you juggle family and personal time as a registrar. The reputation of surgery, the surgical trainees working really hard is true. So usually 60 to 80 hour weeks. And, you know, I think some things are better now, but there's some weekends on call where you'd get 4 or 5 hours for the weekend, things that we really need to change in the system, but haven't been changed yet. So during that time, there's very little time to do anything other than surgery, other than your training for those 4 or 5 years. And I waited to have my children until after I did my final exams. And I had my daughter at 35 and I had my son at 38. And I'm telling you those ages because that's really relevant when we're planning our careers. And I'd love to say that it's the same for men and women, but it isn't. And it's one of those situations where women have to think more about those choices than men do. And I think it's one of the inequalities in our system that at the moment as a registrar, it's very difficult to have small children and be a trainee. Many of our registrars are managing and they're doing it. The men have an easier time than the women. But we don't as yet have part-time training programs for registrars, which would make it easier. So at the moment, people are still often needing to make the choice about either waiting with their specialization or waiting with their kids or having a really difficult time of juggling both of them. And very, very lastly, advocacy, activism, and being a clinician. I think the answer to the question is, can you do that? And I think the answer is yes. And I think it's not only possible to do, but I think really important that clinicians that are seeing patients are also vocal advocates at various levels. And advocacy doesn't have to be writing national articles or being on TV or even leading huge protest campaigns, though it can be all of those things, and that's great. It can also be just within the place that you're working in. Advocacy is about improving the system right where you are, whether that be making sure that the OPD folder arrangements are improved, or patient communication from your ward, or the way that we interface the social determinants of health and what we do. So advocacy can be at many levels, and I think it's a really integral part of being a clinician, which helps to keep us sane and helps to keep us motivated and inspired in what we do, because even in little ways we can constantly change and improve the system. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Karen Cross. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing your journey so generously. And I think that answers a lot of the questions that we had. Thank you. So our second speaker for tonight is Professor Salome Maswime. She studied medicine at UKZN and graduated as a specialist obstetrician from Wits in 2013 and went on to pursue a PhD looking at cesarean-related morbidity and mortality across 15 hospitals in Gauteng province. She's a recipient of the Discovery Foundation Massachusetts General Hospital Fellowship Award, which allowed her to study and train at the Massachusetts General Hospital Center for Global Health in Boston in the United States of America. In 2016, she was acknowledged as a trailblazer and young achiever by the former president of South Africa. This year, she's been included in the class of 2020 World Economic Forum Young Scientists Community. She's also the president of the South African Clinician Sciences Society and is now part of the Faculty of Health Sciences at UCT as the head of global surgery, and has recently been featured in one of the leading medical journals, The Lancet. She's going to be speaking a lot about her journey to becoming an obstetrician and global surgery. She'll be speaking about her qualifications, experiences, degrees, diplomas, to specialize or not to specialize, the concept of a clinician, teacher, clinician scientist, entrepreneur, family and social commitments, developing your career, making a difference, the skills we don't learn in medical school, and how to develop your own journey. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here, Prof. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much for inviting me and also for giving me this opportunity alongside two amazing speakers that I know personally and that I deeply respect and admire. So I'm going to talk about my own journey for a bit. And I think the take-home message I want to give you today is really write your own story. And I think part of sharing our stories is not so that we can give you, a blueprint of what to do, but rather share ideas and what we did and how we ended up where we ended up. But so that you can write your own story at the end of the day. And everyone's journey is going to be unique, but I thought to start off like Lydia did with my own story would also help a few people just to see how you navigate. And so I left medical school. When I left medical school, in fact, I tried quitting medicine a few times throughout my medical career. I was just that medical student who was there, didn't enjoy what I was doing, was really frustrated. But I think my parents had signed up that, I'm the last born at home, and my parents, as their last hope, really, to have a child that becomes a doctor. So when I decided that I'm going to do medicine, it was excitement for my family. And when I decided that I was quitting, no one was ready to hear it. I told my parents, I got phone calls from everyone, my aunt saying, don't do this, you're making a wrong decision. So I didn't start off with a blueprint. I didn't start off knowing where I was going. And in fact, like Lydia said, serendipity, that's how life is. You somehow end up where you're meant to end up. So after doing my internship, I decided, I'm taking a break. Finally, I've done my internship. Let me take a break. And part of when I was doing my internship, what I wanted to specialize in was health economics. That's the field I wanted to go into. But I applied and I wasn't accepted. During my internship, I decided to do a diploma in project management with Varsity College. And so already my head was elsewhere. It wasn't as a clinician. So after internship, I decided to quit for a while. I had other reasons, for quitting. My husband had to be in KZN. My bursary expected me to go to Limpopo. So it was a convenient time to become a housewife and sort of decide where my life was going to go. And quickly got frustrated, felt miserable, and decided I wanted to go back into medicine. And so got accepted in a hospital in rural KZN and got thrown into the labor ward a month later. And, quickly, very soon fell in love with the labor ward, deliveries, all of that. And so that's when I decided that I wanted to be an obstetrician. And it wasn't just the exciting part, it was also experiencing the deaths and feeling inadequate. And so sometimes in a rural hospital, you get to a point where, you're good enough is not good enough. With all the training that you've learned, there's certain skills that you haven't acquired in medical school, and you have to be the doctor who signs off the death certificates, who explains to the patients what went wrong, to the families. And I think for me, that experience just, raised alarm bells that I needed to go and specialize and work on my own skills and at least become some sort of expert or specialist in my field. And I went to Baragwanath Hospital, specialized almost immediately. I spent 2 weeks really, I spent a month as a medical officer and immediately got a reg post and did my 4 years of reg time, which went well, had its ups and downs, but I think by that time I was quite committed. It was challenging. I didn't plan when I wanted to have my kids. 2 years into reg time, I fell pregnant and, had to deal with it. I remember telling my HOD in one of the hospitals that I'm pregnant, I'm a registrar. And, she gave me this look and she actually asked me that, what about family planning? How do you fall pregnant? You're a registrar. What were you thinking? And so had to deal with all of that as a woman, where you get into a specialty and you actually told, use contraception, use a Mirena, make sure you don't fall pregnant. You told that your marriage isn't gonna survive this, so everyone here has had a divorce, and some of those things did happen. A lot of my friends have divorced in the time because it's not easy. But I'm just giving you background because, there were questions asked around family and the balancing. So anyway, after specializing, as if that wasn't enough, I decided I wanted to do a PhD, got an opportunity to do it, applied and did my PhD still with WITS, took 2 years off to focus on the PhD, and I got a fellowship that was paying me a salary, basically to study full time. So I did that, and again, at that time, fell pregnant again, hadn't planned it either. And so now I had to report to my supervisor, the assistant dean of research, and the head of the program, and it was now a problem because how do we discuss, how do we work it out, how do we handle this pregnancy, or and my funders in New York had to be contacted to discuss what would be done about how the fellowship would accommodate my pregnancy. But anyway, had my kids in between. So it was always a juggle. There was no time where I was simply focusing on my academic career. It was focusing on being a mother, everything at the same time, and trying to do well in what I was doing. And, it gets narrower and narrower. When you community service, there's so many of you, then you specialize, it's almost like this small group elite of obstetricians. And then you go into a PhD and there's like 10 of you in the university, perhaps, or even less. And so the kind of the company you keep gets narrower and narrower. And so at that time, because there were so few of us doing PhDs, as specialists, I started interacting more with people outside of obstetrics, pediatricians, cardiologists, etc. And so, moved also outside of that bubble of life revolves around obstetrics and gynae. And somewhere in there developed this whole interest in global health and, looking at maternal outcomes from a global health perspective, and trying to see why do women in South Africa die from certain conditions when in other parts of the world, women are not dying from the same conditions. So that's basically my story. And when I realized, now I finished my PhD 2017, and now I was like the only person in my department that had a PhD. And so any research I was being asked, start a research unit, start this. And so I felt I needed to go to a place where I could be a student, where I could learn as well. And that's when I decided that to apply to go overseas. And went to MGH for a year in the Center for Global Health. And there it was almost like a postdoc and being mentored in this cutting edge environment, and moving away from a place where I'd been told, you've come this far, everything, leaders, moving to a place where I could just learn and be like everybody else. And from there, because my work had always been on cesarean sections, it then led to getting involved in global surgery. And that's how I got headhunted to UCT to head up global surgery. And it's been quite an amazing journey. I've been here for a year, but I've completely loved the experience that I've had here. So talking about qualifications, so I've mentioned it all already. From my MPCHB, I did a diploma in project management. I did my master's, FCOG, and PhD, and then went overseas, did a postdoc. I also was quite interested in leadership. I looked at my CV and I'd done quite a bit in terms of academic certificates, but I still knew that I needed a bit of leadership experience. So at some point I did a certificate with MIT on leading organizations and change. So that's kind of my journey, and it's not your straight path, but it represents kind of who I am, what I believed in, and it fitted well into, coming to where I am now. So questions around to specialize or not to specialize, and it's each person, as I've said, has their own story. Medical school often puts you in some sort of a box, and there's like choose between 6 specialties and choose to be one of these things. And life isn't like that. Sometimes some of us are not wired into those boxes that have been created. So it's important that you choose to do what you really want to do with your life, what you believe in, what you really enjoy. And just as Lydia said, whilst you're doing it, you'll meet people that are like you and that believe in the things that you believe in, and you start building from there. So it's not a straightforward specialize, and things have changed. We no longer, the whole hierarchy thing that you have to become a specialist for people to respect you. I think a lot of us no longer think in that way, and so no one should feel the pressure to follow a certain path just because this is what is expected of a medical student. I'm going to talk quickly about the concept of a clinician teacher, clinician scientist, and the business person or the entrepreneur, if I can put it that way, because medical school doesn't teach us these concepts. And so I applied for my PhD, and suddenly I was told you're in a clinician scientist program. I didn't know what that was, but I eventually developed a love for the whole thing. And so some of us are going to end up in academic centers and will be the teachers. And some of us are going to take the path of being excellent clinicians, developing the next generation of clinicians, following the path of education, creating medical curriculums, becoming deans, etc. But some and others are going to go the clinician scientist route and become researchers and do their PhDs and really contribute scientifically. So it's important just to know that being a clinician is not the only goal. There are other, even as a clinician, there are other choices as well. But some people don't choose either of those routes. Not everyone is going to end up working in a tertiary hospital. Some people are going to go the business route. it and will want to start their practices, will have their practices as a source that generates income. And, you know, I was listening to someone the other day that medical school doesn't prepare graduates for that as well. You know, you specialize and then you're running your practice almost as a business, but no one has taught you how to manage finances, etc. So personally, I never went that route. You know, it wasn't something that I chose for myself or something that I had a desire to do. But it's important to acknowledge that some people are wired in that way and will go that way, and others will do everything. You know, you'll have a practice, you'll work a bit in the state, you'll do a bit of research here, and it's fine. Everyone has to choose their own path. I've spoken a bit about family and social commitments, and I think my advice to everyone is have a life and enjoy your life and do other things, have hobbies. You know, don't let it all be about med school and try. There are times where you need to delay and say, you know, I mean, when I was 23, I got married when I was 23. When I was 24, I knew that this is not a good time for me to have children. But when I was 29, you know, which was when I had my first son, you know, I didn't have the, you know, it was fine. So there is a time where you have to say, let me wait until the right time, and it might just be to wait until you've specialized, etc. But you know, I would say don't stop your life just because you want to focus on your career. There is a way of trying to juggle a bit of both, because sometimes people regret the choices they made. Or, you know, you're 40 and you wish you had done some of this earlier. So try to see if you can juggle some of these things and to enjoy. I enjoy being a mom, I think, far more than I enjoy the work that I do. I see myself as a mom to my 2 boys, most importantly, and then comes global surgery and everything after that. And it's important for each one to choose what's important to them. And so I've mentioned the things that you don't learn in medical school. And I think advocacy, research, and education, and seeing health sciences as a field, as an education field, you know, that there are people that are developing your curriculum. It's not, you don't just wake up and textbooks are there. There are people who are creating textbooks, who are designing the programs. And that in itself is a field in medicine that some people will go for and will enjoy. So in a nutshell, that's what I have to say. And just to close off by saying I've thoroughly enjoyed my you know, what became of my life. When I left med school, I thought I was going in another direction. And I think I ended up exactly where I'm meant to be, with the people that I'm meant to be with. And what the biggest thing for me was not succumbing to the pressure of putting myself into a certain box, but choosing that this is what I want to do, and looking for people, even if it meant outside of the country, finding people that were thinking like me and aligning myself with those people. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Masime, for covering all those aspects so elaborately. So we'll just move on to our third speaker. So our last speaker for tonight is the head of Department of Otorhinolaryngology at the University of Pretoria and Steve Biko Academic Hospital. He is South Africa's first Black ENT specialist, and in 2019, he led the first team in the world to use 3D printed bones for reconstructive middle ear implants. In 2008, he made history by developing a surgical technique that allowed for a bloodless endoscope-assisted tonsillectomy, which is also considered to be a world's first. And currently, he's busy with his second PhD degree at the University of Pretoria, and is a part of a department that launched the Steve Biko Roberts Kerr Cochlear Implants Project, whose mandate is to restore hearing, particularly to those individuals who would not otherwise have the financial means to access that level of care. Amongst other things, he's a pastor who runs his own church, and living by the words innovate or perish when it comes to clinical procedures, teaching, and research, Professor Mashudu Chifularo joins us tonight as our third and final speaker, who amongst many things is going to tell us about the future of artificial intelligence and the fourth industrial revolution, as well as the intersection with medicine. So thank you, Professor, for making the time to come and speak to us tonight.
Thank you so much. It is really an honor to have been invited to be part of such a big University of UCT. Also in amongst such a distinguished ladies. I don't know why I'm getting involved. Maybe I look like a lady, but I'll accept that tag because it's a ladies' month. But I appreciate and I hope I'll shed some light. I enjoy the two speakers. They've covered a lot of things that I thought I was going to share with you. So I think mine is going to be just slightly different. I'll focus on one or two areas. I saw that you had a lot of questions. And when I look at them, I thought you were going to ask me about ENT, but likely they were just mainly about life. So I'm going to tell you the story of my life because, you know, the story of your life is the best thing that you can tell because it's what you know. We always say that it's easier to tell the truth than tell a lie because you have to remember how you lied last time. So if I have to tell about my life, there's no need to lie. Yes, I come all the way from Limpopo in Venda, and I was just a small boy who grew up in the rural community of Venda in those late 60s and 70s, very difficult times. And when I was still very young, at grade now is I think is grade 5, grade 6, so we used to have a class where they used to ask us about what do you want to become when you grow. So I was around 10 years of age, and there and then the only career that I thought of was I would like to become a medical doctor. So for me, from around 10, 12 years, I knew very well that I want to become a doctor, not a nurse, not a lawyer, not an engineer. Of course, we didn't know much about those other specialists, but I was very determined to become a doctor. And the teacher was teaching us then, he said, no, you're not intelligent enough. You cannot become a doctor. But I was very determined to prove them wrong. Even when I went to high school, I did now, which is grade 11, my teacher who was teaching us maths and science was promoted to become a principal. So we had no teacher in the beginning of grade 12. I had to leave my school and go to another school where they had maths and science because my mind was clear. I wanted to become a doctor. There was no role model. The only people that I met was few doctors when I used to go to hospital. I suffered a lot from tonsillitis and a lot of nose bleeding. I was a very sickly child. Prof. Masima will tell you, being the second born boy twin child, the mortality rate is very high. So I survived from the uterus till now. But sometimes I said maybe God has his own way, depending what you believe in. For me, I believe that the man above had a plan. So with that in mind, I could not, when I applied to medical school, I did not even know the degree that I was taking, that is MBCHB. I just said I want to become a doctor. And after passing grade 12, I had no money, no bursary, nothing. So I could not make it to medical school at first go. I had to do a pre-med at the University of Venda. But I was focused. I said, I want to become a medical doctor. Luckily, those days in the homelands, if you were admitted in the medical school, they gave you money and you went straight, which is what happened. So my journey has always been focused that I wanted to become a medical doctor. I see you ask a lot of questions about when to specialize and how and what to go. During my studies at Medical School, University of Natal, I was at the same class with the late Professor Mayosi, who was very focused as a professor and a scientist and distinguished person the way he was, because he came from the family of doctors. I think the father was an obstetrician. For us, we had no role model. We were just wanting to become a doctor. So from I joined at second year until I finished. I love every field that I was studying: anatomy, neuroanatomy, biochemistry. When we came to obstetrics, peds, I was fascinated by pregnancies. So before I finish psychiatry, I said, "What is this thing, psychiatry? What is going on in the mind?" So when I finished medical school in the 1987, I I was confused. I said, I don't want to specialize. It was too difficult. I just go back to vendor and be a good GP. And yes, I went. I worked for 3 years. After 3 years, I was bored because, as a GP, you're always prescribing the sick note. You have to explain, which is tiring and boring. I said, no, I don't want to do these things. And that's when I decided to say, okay, before I could do anything, because then we did not have community health, I got an opportunity to go to UK, which most of us were doing. And I did a little bit of being a locum doctor in a private hospital. So I travel around. That was 93, 94, and I came back to South Africa in 1995. But by then, my mind was already made that I want to become a specialist. But choosing my specialist then was based on the needs of the community. I said, I want a specialist where I'll have life. So when you choose specialists, you must choose something where you have life. There are some specialists where you don't have life, but you will be rich. But medicine, you can't be rich. There's no money in medicine. It's like a wheelbarrow. You don't push it, it stops. So medicine, you work hard. You have to love medicine. If you don't love medicine, you'll be frustrated. I enjoy what I do. And I think if I go back, I'll still continue to become a doctor. I'm going to share with you a little bit about different specialists, how to choose and what not to choose. I still believe that not all of us were cut to be specialists. It has to do with your personality. It has to do with your philosophy. It has to do with your drive. Medicine is a boring career because it's either you know or you don't. It's only when you research and you find new things and you innovate that it becomes exciting. So people who are researchers, you're just researcher by nature. Sorry to use the late professor. I remember when we were doing third year, when he was waiting for his wife, Professor Nontantla, he had to do research. So some people are just wired to be researchers. So if you are wired like that and it's in your blood, just want to know something, you can decide to say, look, I want to go into a career of being a researcher, of being a specialist, but not everybody is like that. For me, when I did obstetric as a medical officer in Chilizini in Venda, Prof. Masumi, I'm sure she'll be very excited. My first research was in obstetrics post-cesarean sepsis because I was a medical officer in obstetric for 1 year. I nearly became an obstetrician, but I said, this is a difficult specialist. There's a baby, there's a mother. I don't know. Sometimes they come, they want babies. I don't know where to get them. So I don't think it's my specialist. And I still remember the results of my research, which I did not publish because I could identify even then, that was in 1990, that there was only one surgeon who did not scrub well, who wait for too long with the rupture of membrane, and who took long in theater. So all his patients were having sepsis. So I'm just showing you that when you love research, it's just in your blood. When I was a registrar at Medunsa, before I finished my training, I had 4 articles already because it's just in your mind. You just want to research. You just want to see something. So there's no sort of like a rule. My previous colleague says that, I think Prof. Lydia, she said, there's no blueprint. It's true, there's no blueprint. I had no mentor. I had nobody to talk to. A mentor is just there as a soundboard to hear how they chartered their life. Sometimes I said it's a philosophy how you live. For me, I love medicine and I enjoy it, and I love teaching and I enjoy it. I can do it anytime. If I have to ask myself now at my mid 50s, I said, I thank God I'm blessed to be alive. So it's a personality thing, and there's no right or wrong. So whatever you believe in and whatever keeps you going, just enjoy it. Because when you specialize, the professors are highly considered people. They are going to tell you off and you'll feel very small. But your life is not measured on how you pass the exams and how you answer their questions. The life is broader and is bigger. As Prof. Masume said that, write your own story. And you must have that mentality. I'm writing my own story. There's no blueprint. I can look and say so and so has done this way, but there's no blueprint on how we do things. And when I finished my training at Medunsa, I did not have a post, so I decided to go into private practice. For 1 year, I was very, very, very busy. I was one of the 2 specialists in Limpopo, and my practice was very busy. And then in 2000, I was asked to come back to Medunsa as a professor. And I had to decide to continue as a private practitioner, ENT specialist, and make more money, build more house, and break more hearts, or deciding to come back to medical school and multiply myself. So I decided to say, look, let me go back to medical school and train a lot of our Black students. During my training, it was very sad and it was very painful. For me, doing undergraduate training in University of Natal, there was no way we could specialize. You're lucky you're sitting at UCT. We could not go to UCT. The only place as Black person where you could train was University of Natal, and even then was called Black Section, Alan Taylor Residence. Nowhere. And little bit at VETS. It was just before Medunsa started. And when I specialized again in 1995 from UK, there was no university that could accept me except Medunsa. And even when I got there, the thing that broke my heart was that there were a lot of Black specialists, but all of them were foreign specialists. So just hear my heart. I'm not trying to be xenophobic here. So all these universities were very good in admitting people who were not local. And they say we have Blacks. So it was so difficult for me to become a specialist. I was the 3rd specialist. There were 2 guys who were trained at VETS, Ceciane and my big professor, my big doctor, Dr. Nyoka. Those were my 2 specialists who were ahead of me. So I realized that our Black kids are not offered the opportunity to train. So when I came back to Medunsa, my mind was, I'm going to train a Black child. I'm going to lift as I rise. I'm going to open the door for other kids to realize that we can open opportunity for them because they were closed all over. I'm very proud to say that in the past 20 years, I've trained more local Blacks in ENT than anyone else, all the university combined. And 3 of my trainees, the first lady that I trained in Medunsa, she's heading Medunsa ENT department. The second lady that I trained in University of Pretoria, she's heading University of UKZN. The first male that I produced in Medunsa is the professor in Walter Sisulu in Eastern Cape, apart from other that I trained. So, in life, you need to have things that drives you and that keep you moving. And for me is to see a Black child excel. So you ask a lot of questions. How do you know when to do? There's no blueprint. What makes you wake up every morning and go to school? If you are focused to make a difference in people's life, you'll find a reason to be alive. For me, is to train a Black child. And when I was looking for my ENT, why I became an ENT, I look at all the specialists. I said, I want to have life. And at the same time, I look at specialists where we have few Black specialists. General surgery, there were a lot of Black specialists. My professors, when I was young, they were general surgeons. The other one were obstetrician, they were there. orthopedic surgeon were there, physician were there, even if there were few, but they were there. But there was this specialist which had no one. That was ear, nose, and throat, and head and neck. I knew absolutely not much about it, but I said, it rhymes. It is a nice specialist. I won't mind to do it. It's only when I started to get to know it better that I realized it's a good specialist. Maybe that is the reason that I climbed the ladder very fast to become the first among the youngest black professors in ENT. Maybe I had no competition. Who knows? But and when I was doing the research on who must specialize and who must not specialize, it's interesting that less than 10% of the medical doctor end up specializing. So not everybody must be a specialist, because if you don't choose your specialist well, you are going to be frustrated. There are people who move from undergraduate to specialization and they regret why they choose such specialists. Some of them, they leave medicine and do something else. So as Prof. Masime said, take more time, and Lydia, I think the Prof, she said also the same, do other things, have life, live life, and enjoy. Then decide what you want to do. If you want to become a family person, there are some specialists which are not good. And because being a registrar is not, firstly, it's not cheap. The university now, for you just to train for 5 years, you're going to spend almost 200,000 of from your pocket, because just to register for exam with the College of Medicine is not for ENT, it's not less than 15,000. It's going for almost 20,000. So it's not an easy thing to choose. So you can't come to specialize and you are not focused. You will be wasting money, you'll be wasting time, and you'll be frustrating yourself. It's hard work. So you have to be wired to be a bookworm to be able to say, I'm going to specialize. For ENT now, we need you to do primary exam and intermediate before you can get into the ENT, because we want to sift those people who are not cut to be specialists. I have a sad story of some of the kids that I've admitted in the registrar post, which were forced down my throat. One of the, I think two of them, they spent not less than 10 years trying to pass primary exam. I mean, that's travesty of justice. It's not acceptable, because I was not allowed to sift them so that I have good quality. Not everybody who start to specialize will finish as a specialist. So you have to decide. You can be a very good family physician, a GP, and we need those GPs. Otherwise, it will be very boring if all were specialists, because we don't know some of the things. So if you are cut to be a specialist, you'll know something that you like and take your time, and know that you're going to spend a lot of time. I'm just going to finish up with a few things. I did some research. It was very interesting that some of the highly paid specialists, or the happiest specialist, the rheumatologist, and followed by ENT. ENTs, we are cool fellows. We are not troublesome. If we can't get the babies, we'll get the male or the female, or do the head and neck, otology, rhinology, and we are chilled. We enjoy what we do. Endocrinologists are also one of the happiest specialists. Pediatrician also. Interesting, general surgeons are not bad, but they know who they are. But the people who are lowest paid, internal medicine, depending on subspecialization, are not well paid, and family practitioner, which are GP, and pediatrician, most probably because are non-surgical specialists. These are the American statistics. So I don't know how the South African statistics looks like. The most stressful specialist is critical care, neurologist, family medicine, obstet and gynae, and internal medicine, cardiothoracic and neurosurgeons, and emergency medicine. So if you have the nerve for emergency all the time, this is the place to go. But the highly paid specialists, the gastroenterologists, they make a lot of mullahs, and the urologists with circumcision and things, they do very well. And cardiologists, anesthesiologists, and the ENT, they come somewhere that they are not very far. and pulmonologists and oncologists. So when you decide to choose a specialist, you must decide based on so many things, including your lifestyle thereafter. And in finishing up, you talk about life and when do you decide to specialize. As a Black person, we always have what we call the Black text. You are expected by nature, maybe you young ones, you are lucky, your life is easier, you can go and specialize, you don't need to pull somebody and pay for their school and build your parents and your family houses and things. I had to make sure that all my families are catered for. Maybe some of you, you know, my younger brother, the pediatric surgeon, Nyaweleni Chiflaro, I know he was there at UCT. I had to help him, to pay for him, to be in front of him. So there's a Black tax that you need to pay. And medicine, there's no money in medicine. You have to work hard and you have to continue to be ethical. You must do medicine because you love it. If you don't love it, you're going to make a lot of mistakes and you're going to get into trouble, because fortunately, it's still a respected specialist to a certain extent, and people will still respect you. But have life, enjoy it. Don't wait. And Prof. Masume, you don't have to give excuses when you have babies or what. Life continues because you can't wait. You don't know when things happen. So, and you must look after your family. For one thing, I was asked, what is it that I would have changed? Maybe to get a partner who have the same energy like I am, because when they are not in the same energy bracket with you, they are going to get PhD with you. They are going to pull you down. So fortunately, your colleague, they're in the same field. They understand what you're doing. You will be able to encourage each other. I think family suffers when we become high achievers. And look after your families, because as a family member, a husband, a father, a child, you don't retire. But as an academician, a researcher, you will retire, they'll replace you and put somebody. So don't be so overcommitted to this academy to say, you, I'm stuck here. When your time comes, they're going to say, Prof. Chiflaro, thank you so much. Your retirement has come. Please, we are going to change you. And they'll change you. And don't feel so bad. Just walk away and do something else. I have hobbies. I run church. I play music. I write books. There are a lot of things that I enjoy about life. I'm not very focused. The most exciting time of my life in finishing up is having a relationship with my daughter and my grandchildren, because they are wind under my wings, and also I'm very much anchored on my religious basis. And so you need to have something that keep you grounded to continue to research. I was asked to talk about fourth industrial revolution. The medicine has changed completely. The technology has taken over everything that we do. When you navigate in theater operating, Prof. Masime will tell you, you can have a perfect baby where you clean all the genetics. Precision medicine is here with us and we can't run away from it. And you can tailor-made your treatment to a specific patient according to whatever race, gender, and age. So technology is here and let us embrace it. It's very, very exciting. That is the reason that I'm grateful to have been a pioneer of middle ear transplant and be recognized by the world and many people. But I think more than anything is determination, focus, and passion, and believe that you are capable and you can do. Black child is in you, and there's nothing that you cannot do, irrespective of who says what. Thank you. I hope I shed some light. I was almost preaching, because when I see audience, I want to preach. So I'm sorry if I went too far, but I hope I shed some light. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for your contribution. So both you and Prof. Masume actually spoke about opportunities abroad, and we just have received some questions around how to access those opportunities. And also we've had a question about, does qualifying in South Africa mean you're able to practice overseas if you move? If you specialize in South Africa and locate to another country like Brazil or the UK or Netherlands, do you need to do a bridging course to be registered with that country's health professional council. So any of you can go. So
yeah, I think during my time when I went to UK, it depends where you are qualified. So during my time, if you're qualified from University of Natal or University from UCT, I think VETS, I can't remember what else Prof Masume will add. You need to write the board exam. You need to be accepted. Then you can go and practice, or you can be an observer. But the opportunities are there. It's the same like when people who are foreigner coming to South Africa, they need to be registered with his professional council. So you need to be registered with their council wherever you are going. But if you're in a good university like your UCT or VET or I think UKZ and Natal, can't remember, I'm not aware of the Stellenbosch, most probably they're there now. But I know that used to be difficult with University of Pretoria. And just to mention the top 5, because the others are not listed anyway. So it depends where you qualified, but you need to write the exams, and you can practice. In the UK, then we're practicing and we're treating the patients and we're seeing the patients. Prof. Masume, maybe you can add something.
Yeah, so completely agree. And for me, when I went overseas, I went to do research. So I didn't have to do exams, but I also was then not allowed to touch patients because I hadn't gone through the exams. So going overseas really depends on which country you're going to, what you're going to do, and you just need to comply with whatever rules or regulations they have.
Okay, thank you so much. We have a next question which says, how possible is it to do a PhD and clinical work at the same time? Since PhD work is quite hectic, is it feasible?
So if I go first, it's so many people have done it before, so it's not impossible. For, of course, you know, if you don't have time set aside to focus on your PhD, it might take longer, it might be more difficult. And so I think from my perspective, with the South African Clinician Scientist Society, some of the things we advocate for is for people to be given time or to buy out time to do their PhDs, or even just, you know, maybe not taking on overtime and just having more time to focus. So really, there are people that have taken about 10 years doing their PhDs while working full time. There are those who've done it in 3-4 years. So everyone has their own journey, but I think it's important to look for funding that can support you so that you're not multitasking so much. And I think particularly for women, if it's also a bit harder if you're trying to do it all on your own. And unfortunately, whilst we know that there've been success stories, there've also been people that have tried and did not complete their PhDs. So I don't want to say that it's completely possible to do it when we know that those who did not get funding opportunities also struggled and some didn't finish. But Prof. Chiflaro, I'm sure you can add, because now on your second PhD, you can tell us how you do all of this.
No, yes, that's true. Interesting enough, during our time, PhD was not an issue for PhD was not very important, but I think with the change in the landscape in the academia in the early 2000, the HOD, the professors were expected to do PhD. For me, I did PhD because after doing master's or MEd and fellowship college, what else will you be studying on something except enrolling in PhD? So I enrolled in PhD in the same autosclerosis or deafness that I end up doing what I've just done last year. So it's doable, but you have to have a very thick skin, and you have to have good supervisors who want to see you succeed, but you have to be focused, because the success rate for PhD Prof Maswimi, I think it's less than 30%. So it's nice to register, but to go through protocol, to go through research work, to write thesis, to defend, it's not an easy thing. So if you want to do it, please have certain personality, have certain skill, and it's very cool to have that degree. You feel very excited, but it's not a must for medical specialists. But if you want to go into leadership and everything, is highly recommended these days. So it's possible.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Prof. Karen Cross, as you were speaking, I think you may have mentioned something around research, and the question came in about, does the research have to be on surgical topics, or can it be in any medical field?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the specifics will depend on which department you're applying to, but I think having any research experience for a student going into a registrar program is good. I mean, you may not be in a place where you specifically are working in a surgical area, and so if you get involved in a local project around something related or a general clinical issue, I think that also counts in your favor. Though it's probably better to try and do the research in the area that you're planning to specialize in. I don't want to put too much emphasis on it. At UCT, we asked the question, but certainly it weighs in with a number of other aspects. So my feeling with research is that you must do it to answer a question, and it's always better if, when you find yourself in a place, you are genuinely moved to ask a question about something that's happening around you. And then you say to someone, you know, why so many people with diabetic foot sepsis? What is happening with glucose control in the community? Or what is happening with foot care training? You know, so as I said to Salome, I'm a reluctant academic in this way. So for me, I don't want to encourage research that we need to put onto the CV, because I think that we should be following genuine questions, and I'm sure most people will be, and we shouldn't be setting up registrar barriers to registrarship, which sort of force people to do lots of small little bits of research projects which don't necessarily speak to what they're passionate about knowing about. So I feel quite strongly about research coming from that place of genuine clinical need and clinical interest. But if you are eyes open wherever you're working, you will find a question. So it's more to show that you are open-minded and looking and thinking as you're working. That's important, rather than the specific publication that comes out of it. I hope that answers.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And just on that point, so you're speaking about research that answers a question. So what if you're in one specialty and you're quite interested, or you have a question about something in another specialty? Can you do research in a completely different field when you're in one field? And we also have, just to add on to that question, we've received a question about, is it possible then to specialize in several disciplines at the same time? So for example, doing cardiology and pulmonology simultaneously.
Okay, so I think it differs. I think when you're a medical officer, before you've specialized, yes, of course, you can answer a research question in any field. And I'm a surgeon that does quite a lot of work in the public health sphere. So definitely you can answer questions from outside what might be narrowly defined as your area. You know, if you think broadly, all the aspects of medicine are intimately interrelated. I've just mentioned the diabetes one. So actually I have closer relationships with the medical endocrinologist as a mainly thyroid and endocrine surgeon than I do with some of my surgical colleagues. So yes, it can be outside of your discipline, though it can be more difficult to do that if it's outside of your discipline. Can you specialize in more than one thing at a time? Not by the formal rules of the universities. So if you were to become a cardiologist, for example, you'd first need to do your FCP and then you would do cardiology. It would be quite difficult. You could then afterwards do another certificate in another subspecialty area, though not many people do that. But there are many, you know, outside of the kind of core specialties, there are many hybrids that are possible. But certainly, usually you would start one specialization and finish it. So your track would be surgery, medicine, obs and gynae, psychiatry, sort of the broad tracks. And then within that, you could do pulmonology, cardiology, or in surgery, you can do GI surgery or vascular surgery and so on. And each specialty has a different arrangement of subspecialties within, and I'm sure even, you know, for example, in ENT, I'm sure there's pediatrics, there's, so the slice, you can continue down that route quite far along. And I think what's important with medicine, just as a general comment, is at some point you need to arrive. And if you're doing clinical medicine and academic medicine, that point can never come. So you have to think of it as a journey. And because once you've got your MBCHB, then there's this pressure to, you finish your comm service, then you must specialize. And once you specialize, then you sub-specialize. And once you've sub-specialized, there's a PhD, then there's NRF rating, and then there's something else. So I think to see it as a journey and to, yes, have a goal and a vision, but also walk where you're walking at that particular time as well. Because it's very difficult to see exactly where your path is going to take you far down the road.
Thank you for that, Prof. Karen Cross. And another question has been around funding, because you've spoken a lot about, all of you have spoken about, or Prof. Chifularo towards the end spoke about how it's quite expensive to actually go into specializing. And I know with medicine, getting bursaries and getting funding, it's quite difficult. And even some institutions go as far as saying they don't fund medicine specifically. Is this the case for specializing? Is there an abundance of funding, bursary opportunities, etc.?
So can I also come in on the issue of specialization? You can hear me?
Yes, yes. We can.
Yeah. I would like to encourage you, if you want to specialize, you must arrive, as my professor just said now. But once you have arrived, you must learn to dig deep. You can't be everywhere. So when you say yes to A, you are saying no to B. Choose one area, focus on that, and let your research be focused in one area. You must be known, you must be respected there. If you are everywhere, people don't know how to find you. So for me now, as an otologist, I cannot be in head and neck, I cannot be in rhinology. I'm digging deeper in otology because that is the area that I'm focusing. And when you're a registrar, you are waiting, you are having a funded post that is for 5 years. And I don't know other universities, at the University of Pretoria, my registrars are not even given bursaries. They use their own money to pay for their tuition fee, for exam, for traveling from one exam center to another. It is very, very, very expensive. So I'm not aware of funding for registration, maybe the different discovery scholarship, but I think in other area it is not straightforward because you are working, unless if you are supernumerary or you are doing a fellowship. Prof. Maswime, maybe you can shed some light.
Yeah, I agree with you. With the registrars, there is no funding that I'm aware of. So it's really you paying from your salary. It's usually, I mean, you plan and it's usually doable because you know you've got a salary. It's not like you don't have a salary. I think some of the challenges that Prof. Chifularo mentioned, you know, when you fail and you have to register again with the college, and suddenly there's that extra 15,000, for example, that you need to pay again. You know, those are some of the added expenses that none of us really think about and plan. And I think in general, a lot of people still find, you know, they have their own debts, or, you know, along that line, you know, people have accumulated debts in the process, and suddenly you want to finish specializing so that you can go and pay off your debts. And it's a challenge balancing all of that, because whilst you've got a good salary, but some people really just go to work in private because they need to make up for the money that they lost over the past few years.
Thank you for that to both of you.
We call it black tax, so they have to to pay.
Precisely.
We've got another question here. It says, what are applicants lacking when they apply for registrar positions and are denied, especially since I am guessing the number of applicants are high per year?
Yeah, if I can start there. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for other disciplines, but it really depends on when you apply and which university. So it's not global that that there are a lot of applicants and very few posts. That is sometimes the case. So check and apply and see. And before you apply for a registrar post, I think it is helpful to have had some experience in the field. And there again, applying to many regional hospitals for medical officer time is really good. What is lacking when registrars apply? It's a mixture, but I think experience is there. One of the problems with kind of going straight from comm service into a registrar position can be that it can be difficult if you don't have some of the technical experience yet. But then on the other hand, many people have managed, with no, to go straight from comm service into registrarship. But I would say that experience is one of them. And then the exam. So having a primary exam, having gone through your primaries is very helpful when you're applying for a surgical post. Certainly in some of the universities that I know, most places you will do your intermediates during your training, but some experience and your primaries will help a lot.
Thank you.
And maybe if I can just add that, it becomes more competitive. There are a certain number of posts that are there. And so with time, there's a lot of competition. And, I liked the model. I liked what I used to see in some countries overseas where, becoming a registrar in certain fields has become so competitive that medical officers start their PhDs so that they can put on their CV that we're PhD students, and they more likely to get in than somebody who hasn't published or who hasn't done anything else. And we might be moving in that direction very slowly, but we might also be moving in that direction. I see the amazing work that medical students in UCT are doing. I mean, you guys are doing MSCs, honors, all of these things that we were not doing as medical students. And so chances are when you apply, you might have an advantage over somebody else just because there are 5 posts, for example, that have been set aside for registrars in that particular hospital or institution.
Can I also add? I think Prof. Nasumesh is right. The competition is becoming very high, so we will need experience, Prof. Lydia, in the field, because you might go in having a certain impression about a certain specialist. If you come to ENT now, registrar training, I said 110 is head and neck cancer. So if you come to that specialist, you're seeing cancers all I enrolled for. So having experience in that field so that you know how to deal with emergency airway obstruction, nose bleeding, it will help you when you come to interview. You compete for post. I mean, for me, maybe is now, can I have one post and I have almost 20, 30 applications. So I choose the best because the best make it exciting, is enjoyable. And when they start, they finish and they do some exciting research. So there's a lot of competition. So you need to know what you want and you must up your game. Otherwise, it will be very frustrating. Specialization is not like undergraduate. Undergraduate, you have passed before you even go for exam. Specialists, you failed before you go for exam. So you must prove yourself. So don't take it lightly. The workload, the demands are not, it's even better now with the college blueprint that they make sure that everybody pass, but it's not easy. It's a hard work. So don't take it lightly and don't just say, because I'm Chiflaro, I'll get the post. No, 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 no. The only interview I went for in my whole life was to become an HOD. All other posts, I just talk to the CEO or the super, hey, I need a post. Okay, come and start on such and such day. Now you get interviewed for just being a medical officer and a registrar post.
Thank you so much. So we have another question, two questions actually, that I'd like to lump together. So is there a role for doctors with an understanding in artificial intelligence / bioinformatics, formatics / precision medicine? And are there any specialties at risk of being replaced by artificial intelligence?
Very interesting question. Some of us were born before technology, so even to do a Zoom is a mission, thanks to COVID. So we have to learn how to learn these gadgets. So artificial intelligence is at another level. Information technology is very, very fast, and knowledge is coming very, very fast. So you need to be at that level to be able to cope and deal with it. But there are some specialists that they're going to be redundant. Some they're still questioning that getting an interpretation of a CT scan, is it better by a computer or by a person? So some specialists are going to suffer a lot. Diagnosing a dermatological condition, is it better by naked eye or is better by a computer? Checking the retinal hemorrhage, is it better by ophthalmoscopy or you just need a computer to interpret? So some specialists are going to be stretched a little bit because they won't be able to synthesize what is happening, but you always need a human touch. So you can't beat the human touch. I can rather be treated by a person rather than a robot. So I still want a person who will be able to even if they don't know anything, just holding my hand is more than enough, because sometimes we don't even know how people get healed. It's just human touch. So some specialists will be suffered more than others, but we need to embrace technology, like in doing robotic, in urology, and now in the cochlear implant. People are testing doing robotic cochlear implant, navigate the whole thing into the middle ear. So we need to embrace it and run with it and explore. But the human touch will always be there.
Thank you so much for that. We have another question, and here it says, as a woman, do I have a decreased chance? As a woman, do I have a decreased chance of getting into a female-dominated specialty, such as pediatrics or gynecology?
I don't work in that kind of specialty, so I'm going to leave Salome to answer that one. Mine is definitely male dominated.
So I mean, the answer is no. I think what we've been trying to emphasize is that, there's a whole move towards excellence and wanting the best candidates in. It's competitive. There are more people. There's also been a strong move towards increasing the number of specialists in certain fields, in surgical specialties especially. So I wouldn't say we've come to a point where, if you're female, then, I still think there are a lot of there's still a very high demand for female gynaes, for female pediatricians, because just, there's a certain way. I'm giving a biased answer, but I've always found that, the general community, people love having female gynaes and appreciate that for whatever reason. So I don't think we are going to become redundant. I think we need to people should still apply and follow their passions. I don't think it should be driven by a fear of whether you'll be accepted or not, or whether you male or black or white. You know, let's follow our passions and pursue them, and not be afraid of all the barriers that may come with it.
Yeah, thanks, Salome. I mean, I would agree with that. And I don't think that we are in a position where there is sort of negative affirmative action in terms of women in any of the disciplines. I mean, the whole discussion about the feminization of medicine and the impact for surgical disciplines and other disciplines that are male dominated is a really important one, because if we don't recruit, if we recruit so few women, it means we're not recruiting the best overall. And some of the issues that Salome highlighted so clearly in her personal journey are some of those things that need to change. So I would agree, follow the thing that you want to do, and let's change the system to make it fit in with our lives.
Can I come in as a man here? I know when we were training, there were some ladies like specialists like orthopedics, but because of that, but there are now a lot of other specialists or female in this specialists of orthopedics, and interesting enough, we don't have any preference. Anybody wants to specialize and they're good enough, they come into the specialist. And by the way, my urologist is a female. How is that?
You are brave.
He's pursuing excellence.
No, I'm pursuing excellent, you know, and get the best, you know. So I think for the student, choose whatever you love, and just know that every specialist has his own good and bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you'll know when you're in that specialist. But there's no specialists that are really meant for certain people.
Yeah. And if I can just add, I think the other thing now is how many women are in leadership. So that's what now we are starting to look at, how many HODs are female, you know, those things, and not just how many registrars come in, because they can come in if they, you know, you can be 50%, 60% female, but you've got a male HOD, and that's the dominant part, you know, and in leadership, those are the dominant things that we're seeing. So developing women into leaders in the medical schools is also a priority, and something that's important, that level of transformation needs to happen as well.
Thank you for those contributions. So I'm cognizant of time, so it's 8 o'clock now. So we'll just take 2 more questions before we close. So this question says, is it better to stay in the circle of academic hospitals if one wants to specialize?
So I'll give my view, which I'm happy for the other speakers to oppose. I felt that some of my, you know, what helped me was being in that district hospital, making decisions, learning, learning how to do things, independently. Of course, there was some support, but I felt, I was a bit more prepared as a registrar, because I didn't have that fear of, oh, it's an ectopic, what am I gonna do? I'd learned, you sink, you swim, you survive, So I found that the community experience and being out there in the rural does help in developing confidence, in developing skills. You might learn a few things that are wrong as well. So I don't want to make it sound perfect. And as you grow, you realize, you see the good and the bad that you've learned. But I particularly advocate for district and hospitals when you're still trying to gain your confidence and find your place as a young doctor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a smaller place where you can make your decisions and sometimes make your mistakes is important for confidence, and that's why I think, you know, a year or two as an MO, not so long that you struggle to realign your work with a more academic practice. So that's a real thing. But definitely it's, you know, you're confident as a young doctor. And I remember the night that I decided, wow, I think I need to specialize because I don't know what I'm doing with this laparotomy. So I think those lessons are important, and you don't always get that in an academic hospital where there are too many layers of seniority between you and the patient.
I also agree with the two ladies. I think they are very, very right, because otherwise you will, in the academic medicine, you'll remain the most junior in the team, and you won't learn the basic skills that are needed when you get into the training program. So when you're in the rural area, you become the all-rounded doctor, you develop the skills, and you also test your passion for whatever you want to specialize in. And if you want to write your primary exam that you can do in a rural area where you have more time, that is the best place to be, because everything is more less hectic than when you're in the academic institution. And then when you come back, you're all-rounded doctor. And sometimes you need to be all-rounded to be able to hit the ground running. Because once you get to the registrar post, there's no time to waste. You can't be trying to say, I don't know how to hold a switch. I don't know how to do laparotomy. I don't know how to deal with emergencies. It's too late. So I totally agree with them. The rural area, be the doctor, when they say doctor, they're talking about you. Not they're talking about your seniors, no. So the rural is the best place to be. You'll keep on, now you don't, we used to carry stools and urine before. In the academy, you'll continue to be carrying stools, and you won't be asked because they will be concentrating on the registers.
So thank you. So our last question a question just came in, but this person is asking, how do you feel about the brain drain in South Africa due to the poor working conditions?
That's a loaded last question. But I think the brain drain is bidirectional. It's working conditions, and it's also push and pull. So we're talking usually about Northern Hemisphere pull factors, and then within our country the push factors. So I think conditions of work for health workers at all levels is absolutely critical in South Africa, highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic and the PPE issues, amongst other things. And as we talk about academic medicine and specializing and so on, we have to be cognizant that health workers at the coalface are really stretched beyond capacity most of the time, and that needs to be addressed. So addressing that as a package, it's not just salaries, it's also about feeling that you are making impact where you are. So having equipment, having supplies, being able to do the operations that you need to do. So it's a systems improvement that's required to improve quality of life and job satisfaction for health workers in the country. And at the same time, we need regulation of unethical recruitment of health workers from high income rich countries that are recruiting health professionals at all times, and rather have a commitment to a developmental approach which is global for all health workers across all spectrums of work.
I'll come in and say, you know, I think, Lydia has spoken about the global brain drain, but the real brain drain in South Africa, I think it's between private and public hospitals. And I'm an advocate for public hospitals, for public care, because the real numbers are that, you know, you've got about 70% of patients who cannot afford medical aid in this country. You know, that's the reality. And then you've got 70% of doctors working in the private sector who's looking after the patients in the public sector. And yes, there are real problems that need to be addressed, but I do think that it's important to sensitize yourselves to the real numbers and the real situation that goes on out there. And when we say patients do not get quality of care and do not get the best care that they can get, a lot of the people that should be looking after them are not in those hospitals. district hospitals, regional hospitals that do not have specialists, even in cities. So how much more in remote areas? So I will end off on that note to say, you know, some of the problems, yes, they need to be fixed by government, etc. But some of the decisions we make as practitioners, as doctors, to say we want to be there for the public sector and ensure that more people have access to healthcare.
Also come in there. It's a very interesting question, and I think the buck stops with an individual. We have a good training in this country, in some top universities, so you can decide where you want to go. And I think we have all worked overseas. We could have decided to stay there, but we chose to come home and help to develop our country and our people. So you can choose. For me, I'm in the public institution for a reason of wanting to help my people. I can go to private practice, I can go overseas. So you cannot stop people moving. People move. It's not only South African going somewhere. You have a lot of foreign people who comes here. So I think it's a human nature for people to move, but you must decide where you want to be. And because of this good quality training that you get, that's why now the government is going for something called medical clinicians. And I think they do the same in the private practice. They have theater technicians, because the nurses that are fully trained, they can go anywhere and work overseas. And so when you're a technician or you're a clinician, you cannot work anywhere else except in the country. So it's a challenge, it's a problem. Yes, in the state, there's a lot of problems, things are not there. But let's be part of the solution, not to say, look, these are not working, then I'm working. It's a personal choice. Once somebody decided I'm coming to train, when I finish, I'm going, you can't stop them. But this country needs us to make it different. We can't change the laws and rules. Let's be advocacy, like Lydia has said, and also Salome. But it's all in your hands to decide. You want to qualify, pack your bag and leave the country, nobody will stop you. But we appeal to you, let's build our community, let's treat our people. They still need the best treatment, and we are the best people that can do that. That will be my last word. I'm here by choice. I could go anywhere, but I chose to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to cover all of the questions, but some people have asked about specific specialties. So questions have come in about neurosurgery, plastic surgery, psychiatry, emergency medicine, oncology, cardiology. So where can these people find the answers? Where can, after this talk, where can people go, where to from here? Just and final remarks as well.
So just where to go from here. So the Colleges of Medicine has a website, the CMSA website, where a lot of this information is listed. The requirements for specialization, it's quite a dry read, but that's one source. And then for the real on-the-ground information, it would be registrars within the different disciplines that I would speak to. But certainly the basics is there available on the CMSA website. And perhaps after this, we can have a list of registrars or consultants who are open to being contacted or emailed about very specific questions relevant to their disciplines. And then just in final remarks, I think just to say that, you know, as medical students, graduating at some point as doctors, I think it's a fantastic profession. It's diverse. There's an opportunity to serve. There's an opportunity to do politics and to make trouble. There's an opportunity to have an academic career. And I think this is one of the reasons that I really chose medicine. And I think it was a lucky choice, because nobody knows until they do it if they love it or not. But within medicine, there's such a wide scope that it's possible to find something that you will love doing within the field of medicine, and wherever you go as a health worker, you will be a force multiplier for good. So that's also something incredibly powerful to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
So my final words are just, what, be excellent at the end of the day. Choose whatever you want to choose your own story, do what is right, what you enjoy, where you make a difference, but be excellent and do things in a way that you'll be remembered, recognized. It doesn't matter. There's no speciality or any field that is more important than the other, but there are people that make a difference, and there are people that are never forgotten in certain fields. And Prof. Chiflaro will never be forgotten for the surgery that they did, and being the first in the world, and those are signs of excellence. It's not just about ENT or this or that. It's signs about us as individuals choosing to live a life of excellence and giving our best in everything that we try to do. So whether you choose to be a clinician, private practice, and some of you will choose not to see patients, that's the reality. Some doctors do not see patients and enjoy what they do, and it's also fine. And so, but excellence can never be forgotten. So those are my closing words.
Okay, thanks. Also final word first. Lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this a special panel. One of the best prizes that I ever received as a medical doctor was a card that was written by a 6-year-old child. I removed her tonsils, and that was in 1999, 2000, I think. And she wrote a beautiful, beautiful card that I kept for almost 10 years. And she said, "You're the best doctor that I've ever met. You removed my tonsils. They are not painful." And I'll never forget. So as Lydia has said, is a privilege of being a medical doctor, is to deal with people, to touch lives. And I'm very honored to say that child is one of my protege. She's also has finished her medical training in the UCT, and she wants to do public health because she touched my life as I touched hers. So medicine gives you that privilege that nobody else has in any field. And also respect yourself, respect your patient, and be ethical at all time, because people look at you and watch you as a doctor. But do what you love, and there's no right or wrong. So be yourself, enjoy what you do. Life is too short. Don't stress yourself too much. If your professor said you failed, it's not the end of the world. Just go and try it again. So live life and be happy. Don't be too stressed. Otherwise, you will live a miserable life. Enjoy it. It's exciting. And all the best with your future. As they've already mentioned, sometime maybe take a short elective in the specialist that you think you're interested. Go there and work with them so that you understand what they do. Because when you're outside, you don't have an idea what does an obstetrician do. You think, for me, when I went to obstetric, I thought it's just cut umbilical cord, and as I was cutting the umbilical cord, the child was on the floor. So it's not cutting the cord, it's delivering the baby and have a happy and a live mother. So go out there and see what they do. Then you'll be able to decide what you do. But life is exciting, and enjoy it, and just thank the men above. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure I don't speak for myself when I just say that this session has been incredibly enlightening, and I feel like we're in a better position to make these decisions going forward. And so thank you for availing this information, and also practical information that we can start putting into practice. So thank you so much to Professor Lydia Kerenkos, to Professor Salum Masume, and Professor Mashudu Chiflaro for being here with us today. We went a little over time, but I think it was definitely worth it. And to everybody that joined us and sent in questions, thank you. And we hope that this has, shed light on a topic that was once a thank you to everyone. Good night and have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. You can call us or contact us. The lady has numbers. We'll be there to assist you where we can. Fortunately, we're in front, so just learn from us. Thank you.
Thank you.